Hello, and welcome to Two Crones and a Microphone. I'm Sally.
And I am Betty.
We're cultural midwives, and our podcast is about shared wisdom, storytelling, and research from us as experienced crones and friends. So, whether you're seeking a deeper connection to the world around you or just a good dose of perspective, you're in the right place. Pour a cup of something warm, pull up a chair, and settle in. It's time for real talk about how we live, how we heal, and how we show up when the world feels like it's on fire. Subscribe now and join the conversation on social media. We're building something ancient and something new, one story at a time. The courage to choose love over fear, even in the face of what feels like chaos and is unknown. So, as part of our podcast theme, focusing on the earth, we decided to interview our very own crone Betty about Saint Hildegard von Bingen, also known as the Sibyl of the Rhine. She's a German Benedictine abbess. From a long time ago, Hildegard was born in 1098 in Bermensheim von de Hoy, not sure how to pronounce that, German Palatine on the Rhine in the Holy Roman Empire. She died in 1179 at the age of 81. This amazing woman, who's a doctor of the Catholic Church, by the way, there are only 4 women who have ever been proclaimed doctors of the church. And you might be wondering, what is a doctor of the church? Well, that's an individual who advocates for the faithful, and the church has recognized their excellence and wisdom so that things that they wrote are things that we can read and use and think about to enhance our own spirituality and our own spiritual growth. So, just like we think of a doctor of whatever the discipline might be nowadays, the doctor of the church is very similar. It speaks to excellence and wisdom. And because it's a doctor of the church, it ties it into spirituality and our own spiritual growth, which speaks to all of us as crones, by the way. And not only being a doctor of the church, she was canonized on May 10th in 2012, so many years after her actual life, in Vatican City by Pope Benedict XVI, which I find all of this very amazing, and I can't wait to hear more from Betty. But you might be wondering why we would consider Hildegard as someone we would interview when we've been interviewing others who love the earth and the earth element. And so she's an individual who advocated for the preservation and right relationship with the earth back in 1080. So I find that amazing. She was a key environmentalist. She talked about earth energies long before many of us think people were even thinking about earth energies and environmentalism. So, Betty, as long as I have known you, you have been steeped in the teachings of Hildegard. When did she first catch your attention, and what was it about her that caught your attention?
I was thinking back, and I I think it may have been when I was doing research for my PhD. And I came across this woman who appeared to be able to do everything. I mean, everything. And she's was around for so long, and her works have persevered, and they're applicable to today, which is to me is absolutely amazing. I mean, 1,000 years later, we're talking about her and her works, and there are many people out there dedicated to her teachings. She was a musician, loved her music. She absolutely loved her music. She was a painter. She was a visionary. She had vision. She communicated directly with spirit. Um, she was an herbalist. She worked with crystals and
Mhm.
stones. And she was a counselor to popes and cardinals and bishops and the common man. Anybody who came to her, they were not turned away. She did energy healing. She used her hands for healing. I mean, she was just like wowzer.
We,
It's all I could say. So that's how
I
I
mean,
became
well,
interested in her.
well, nowadays we sort of would consider her an all-star because,
Yeah.
right? Because she
Yeah.
sort of does a little bit of everything.
Like a Da
Yeah.
Vinci, right?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, a female Da Vinci, and
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
think about that very often, I have to say. As somebody who always considered myself an advocate for women, she was certainly advocating for everybody um, a long, long time ago. Now, I understand just from a little bit of the work that I did in understanding more about her for this podcast that she kind of was born and lived in the same general area her whole life.
Hmm.
How did she get involved with the Benedictine sisters? Or just, tell us more about that.
Well, she was having visions at a very young age. Um, like they, our earliest recorded, or what she had written down, was around age 8, and probably before that. And her parents were aware of that. So I think part of the reason that they sent her off to the convent was to protect her, because in those days, people did not understand visions, and they thought that anything like this was coming from the devil. So she had some protection there. Also, it was not uncommon for well-to-do families with large amounts of children, which I
Hmm.
think they had 10 children in her family, to tithe, to one of the children. So to give one of the children to the church, be it a priest or be it a nun. Which, by the way, Hildegard did not advocate for as she became older, because she felt it was way too young to send them off. But Hildegard was mentored by a nun called Jutta, it's Jutta, who taught her the ways of the convent, how to pray, how to sing, do the various chants, and taught her how to read and write. So um, she was a huge influence. You can imagine an 8-year-old, right? So she was a huge influence on her. After Judah's death, Hildegard became the abbess of the Benedictine community. And interestingly enough, she gave a lot of freedom to the sisters. Judah did not. Judah was into this real tough spirituality practice, you had to deny things to yourself. You couldn't eat certain things, and to cleanse the spirit. Hildegard did not buy into that. Hildegard was more of the thought that, the body is a temple. We have been given this body by Creator, who, by the way, she did address Creator as male and female. So she was one of the first feminists. And she felt that it was up to us to take care of it the best way we could. So we would eat healthy, um, of course, do our prayers. The singing was a
Hmm.
very, very big part of this. Nutrition was a big part, because the body was our temple. So we had to take care of it. She allowed the nuns to play games. A lot of them who were in the convent came from wealthy families, as she did, and came with huge dowries. All right, that's a whole nother thing there. But some of them had brought some of their clothing with them. Every so often, everybody get dressed up and they'd have little parties. And so she permitted that because, you need fun in your life, right? You need fun. So she often talked about the divine within us. All right. And she was very deep into ecology. So she was very wedded to the land also, and believed actually that we were all connected. All right. We were connected to the earth, connected to the trees, connected to the little animals out there, the elements. And her writings reflect that. When I was in school, I went to Catholic school, and I clearly remember being taught that God had given us all the things on the land to help support us. Not that we were connected, but to support us. That was his gift to us. She didn't advocate that. All right. She advocated that the land was a part of us and we were part of the land. So that's why we're really talking about her today. Um, she also did a lot of paintings on her visions. She had a priest that she was friends with for 50 years. It was her confessor. He was part of the convent, actually. He was the priest to the nuns there, and he would do mass and communion and confessions, take care of them. And he was her scribe. He wrote down everything for her. And he was the one who actually advocated for her to have her visions written down. Now, fortunately, she'd also gotten, before he was writing them down for her, she had gotten a message from the divine that they needed to be written down. And this was like in her 40s when this happened. So the volume of work that she put out was absolutely incredible. I'll have to look. I have it written down somewhere because I couldn't even keep track of it. There's like a whole bunch of books, and some of them I have actually. And of course, doing this, I ordered some more. She's probably not the best thing in the world, but she wrote, let's see. Ugh, you know what? I'm going to put this down in the comments, what they were, so that you can, if you want to order them, you can. They're in publication now, and there is a ton of them. Okay. She also did a speaking tour, by the way, which was unheard of in those days. A woman doing a speaking tour, never mind a nun. That was like unbelievable. But because she was the counselor to, priests, cardinals, bishops, popes, she lived through 3 different popes. She was able to get away with it, basically. So she wrote theological, botanical, and medicinal works, as well as letters, hymns, and antiphons for the liturgy. She also took her nuns and opened up a separate convent, because where they were living, and in those days, this was common in the monastery. You had the men on one side, the women on the other, and she felt that her nuns should be separated. So she took everybody, they went a few miles away, they opened up their own monastery, which actually the order is still alive today. That to me, that's absolutely amazing. However,
Agree that
oh
that's
yeah,
wonderful to think about, that longevity.
it is, absolutely is. You can go visit it today, actually. Now, when she was 75 years old, right? Remember, she only lived to 81. She and the order of nuns were placed under interdict, which meant no Holy Communion, which is, one of the basis of the Catholic faith, right? No singing. They were forbidden to sing, which that must have been the hardest thing in the world for her, really, between not receiving Holy Communion, which we believe to be the body and blood of Christ, and not being able to sing. It was almost impossible. And the reason they did this was because they felt that Hildegard had buried a young man who was a soldier, and he was living in a state of sin. He came to the convent, he died there, and she buried him on the convent grounds. However, the priest who was with him did hear this young man's confession before he died, and Hildegard was present, which is highly unusual, but she was also present and was able to vouch for the fact that he confessed his sins. It wasn't accepted, and they wanted them to go and dig up the body and put it in unblessed ground. She absolutely refused. She said, no, we're not doing that. He deserves to be in blessed ground. This is where he's going to be. And she fought them. And finally, she won. It was hard. She became ill, actually, over this whole thing. but she won. I mean, she was just one tough bird, let me tell you. She was amazing, absolutely amazing.
A powerhouse. When you talk about
Yes,
standing up for what you believe to be right
oh,
and true, well, sometimes we have a hard time doing that today, right? To
yes,
stand up for what we believe to be true and right. Because consequences, right? That's a stiff
yes.
consequence.
Oh God, that was terrible. It was awful. I don't even know how they got through it. It's just really, I mean, this was their lives, right? This is what the nuns did. So I think very interesting is the fact that we do have her original copies. Now, not the original of the work that she did, because they were kept in Dresden. And for those
Mhm.
of you history buffs, we bombed Dresden. Now, I'm not even going to go into that because it was firebombed. And there's a whole bunch of controversy over that as to why we even did it. But we burnt the town to the ground, right, in Germany. And her original work was there, her original manuscripts. But of course, the nuns, being smart, had copied everything. So we do have copies of her original works, her writings, her the hymns that she did. I mean, it's just amazing that they existed, but they did. I really believe the hand of God was into that one.
Well,
So
one, oh, go
what?
ahead. No,
No.
go ahead.
Well,
I was just,
we're just today we're going to talk about her healing work. I think that because that's what these podcasts are about, and how we can use some of her wisdom from healing to apply to our own lives. But what were you going to say, Sally?
oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter.
Oh, it does matter, of course. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about her music, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to go too much off into the music. I think we'll come back to that because you're talking about her healing work.
Well, the music was part of the healing work. In fact, when I was doing the research, trying to winnow it down, I spent a lot of time listening to her music over this weekend. And it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I'd heard it before, but I never really paid attention to it the way I did this weekend. And it's stunningly beautiful. And what little I know of music, it's not easy to sing or chant. It really isn't. Um,
It's not a skill I have. Although, although Linda, our crone
mhm,
Linda, who's not on today's podcast, has sung her words in choirs in churches that she's been involved in, and in
yeah,
her words, she found, Hildegard's work to be very profound and incredibly moving to
yeah,
sing and experience.
yeah.
So the nice thing is, we can find recordings of those things nowadays and listen to them. So if you're interested, it's really something to think about. I had no idea because I've always associated her with her healing work and her herbal work. And so, kind of uncovering this part about what a well-known composer she became, particularly of sacred monophony. um, I didn't really know that before this, and how recorded she actually was, because she's considered to be one of the most recorded people in modern history, which was fascinating to me. But
Do you know
anyways,
she was the first woman to write an opera that we have
mm,
recorded? She,
yeah, who knew that? You know all these amazing things about her, Betty, that obviously that most people don't know.
well, and she also wrote a morality play that was sung. Um,
No.
the nuns all sung their parts, and because the devil was actually played by the priest, to be honest. He was the only man there, so he got to play that part. But she always felt that the devil did not have, music. And I'm sure there are people today who will agree some of our music might sound like that. Um, So he didn't get to sing anything or say anything in this play, right? But he was there. So it's I'm telling you, there's just so much about this woman that we cannot possibly cover in this podcast. So let's just get down to the herbs and the crystals. A lot of it I was able to get from this book, which you can see.
And that's for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube. It's called Physica by Hildegard von Bingen. And it's translated by a woman named Troop,
Yes.
Throop, Priscilla Troop.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be able to access that. We'll have it on our website so that you can track it down if you want to, or if it's easier for you to look at what we're talking about in writing.
So what's interesting to me is that she addressed herbs in this book, the elements, trees, different crystals or stones, uh, fish, birds, reptiles, different metals. I mean, all this in one book. And this woman lived in a monastery.
Right.
So how the heck did she get all this information? She felt it came from the divine. And it's interesting to me
Oh,
because a lot of it is spot on. You know, if you look at it today, there was no research, no way to check it out. I just, she has 200 remedies in this book, 200.
wow, interesting. I know that she's considered to be the founder of scientific natural history in Germany, but
Yes.
but you're right. How did she get all that information? It's not like she was traveling around and doing research.
No, no. So she would go out, say, with the, let's go to the crystals. All right. Which this so reminded me of Oceana. When Oceana taught us about crystals, she would always say, let the crystals speak to you. Right.
Right.
And that's what Hildegard did. She would hold the stone and she would let it speak to her about what it was good for. And interestingly enough, and I had to consult my notes, she was really, she was right on with what we're doing today, right? Like she would talk about, let's see, she would talk about amethyst, all right? And amethyst would be good to purify, to calm you, support headaches, and overall spiritual development, mental clarity, and it was a good stone for protection. Sally, does that sound familiar?
Sounds very familiar, right? Being
Amazing.
of the highest vibration, right?
Mm-hmm.
To connect
Mm-hmm.
to spirit. Lovely.
Um, Emerald was good for the eyes. It would help to improve memory. Onyx was a good stone for protective energy, and it would aid in alleviating stress. So how many times we told
Interesting.
people put some onyx in your pocket, you know, you walk around with it, or put it in your medicine bag, whatever calls to you, you can wear it as a crystal. And she would advocate this, you know. She would
Mhm.
also advocate putting it in some water, perhaps, and using it to anoint yourself or to drink the water. Red jasper, she talked about green jasper because there were two different color stones, right? So the red jasper, which makes sense, would help enhance your circulation. So say you had a heart problem, red jasper would be good for that, right? To get more blood to the heart. Green jasper was very good for digestion. Again, headaches. There must have been people had a lot of headaches in those days. There was no
Interesting.
aspirin, remember? So, well, there was. It was willow, but so and she lists all this in this book. I mean, there's many of the different crystals that you can look into, but it makes me laugh because you know there are some of the our conservative brethren out there who are like, oh, crystals are from the devil, you shouldn't use them. And yet the church All right, the Catholic Church at least has advocated her writings, and here it is. So, kind of think about that. You all can make your own decisions about it, but I know certainly we have used crystals a lot in our practices and for ourselves. And yeah, I notice you have one on now, Sally. They
I do.
they they have good juju. All right, good energy for you, and that's what she talked about, right? When it came to the herbs, she would talk about rose, one of my very favorites. It was good for healing the heart, and actually good for digestive issues. So you would rub some, you may put rose petals on your stomach. You may use some rose oil that you've made. So put the roses in with olive oil. I don't think she used olive oil. Or you can make a salve with the rose petals and use that and rub it on your stomach. Remember, they didn't have really any drugs as we know them today. So she would advocate for the herbs, and she grew a lot of her own herbs. She had a huge garden, and that's where she would get her herbs from. Interestingly enough, like St. John's wort, which we use today, where she advocated for mental and emotional issues. And that's exactly what we use it for today. So she was spot on with so many things. Fennel, great for digestive issues. We talk about that today. What do we give a baby who's colicky? Fennel water, right? Digestive issue for the baby. So you can take it for yourself. Chamomile is calming, soothing, very good to use for any kind of a skin infection or a skin problem. Of course, lavender, and it's interesting to me that she did differentiate between the two different types of lavender. You had spike lavender and like French lavender. And it was good for relaxation, headaches again, of course, the old headaches, and she would advocate that you might put it in tea, brew a tea, which we do a lot of, or a cold or a warm compress. So suppose you have a headache, right? You're going to do a compress to your head. You may put a little bit over your eyes, to just soothe you, relax you, help you to get past all of this. And she used a lot of laying on of hands, because remember, people came to her for healing. So yes, she would prescribe an herb, possibly one of the crystals to use, but she would also do laying on of hands and prayer on the person. So again, this goes back to what I hear from people about, well, isn't this laying on of hands? You're bringing energies from the devil. No, you're not, guys. Think about it. If you're bringing the energy in from source and you believe that source to be the divine that is channeling through you, that's not the devil. So, and again, the church sanctions it. Think about it. She's a doctor of the church. So there's certainly nothing wrong with this. One of the things I found interesting too is that, Sally, she recommends using quince. And I know
Oh, I
last
love it.
year, yeah, you made quince jelly, right? So then there's all kinds of stuff that you can do with this. Of course, she used things like cinnamon, tansy, uh, spelt. She was a big spelt person. Love that. Unfortunately, I can't eat spelt because I'm sensitive. I'm gluten sensitive, right? But she was a big advocate of that. All right. And in those days, they probably didn't have all the problems that created the gluten sensitivity
Right,
anyway. So it helped people.
right.
It was a
So,
very healthy herb. Go ahead.
whoa, I was going to say, well, it's there are so many things to talk about, and I am literally struck by things that we heard from Oceana as a native person
Yes.
to Turtle Island, and Hildegard, who lived right, in 10 to 1178 in Germany, and the similarities between use of crystals, use of herbs, use of just acknowledgement of relationship and right relationship with the natural world. It, in a way, it sort of blows my mind. But mostly it's because when you think about when she lived, not just the similarities between continents and diversely different cultural peoples, the similarities.
Yeah.
And we could keep on talking. What we do hope is that we've piqued your interest in this amazing and very accessible saint. And I know Betty talked a little bit about how we can access the information about Hildegard, because part of the reason why I talk about her being an accessible saint is because there is so much information at our fingertips if we're interested in learning more about not just her as an individual, but all of the amazing things that she brought for us to learn that are still incredibly relevant, which is the other thing that is amazing to me. So, besides the Physica that we talked about, is there anything else that you might want to pass on about how people can learn more about her wisdom and her as an individual?
Yeah, if you just go onto Amazon, there are tons of books out there, and you can read an excerpt for the book and you'll see if this is really what calls to you. Um, and the other thing I did was I went on YouTube. Now, some of this stuff on YouTube is, but I did find one particular YouTube video that I absolutely love because it interviewed different people in different disciplines, including the abbess of the current monastery. So the current abbess, really, of the monastery, the Dominican monastery. And she talks a lot, of course, about Hildegard. It was just great. Uh, and it's called The Unruly Mystic is the series, but her part is the patron saint of creativity. So
Love
if
it.
you look at that, the first person they interview is Matthew Fox, who, of course, has he's an Episcopal priest. He's done tremendous research on her, and Julian of Norwich, actually.
Mhm.
But it's just the plethora of people that they have, and they all have a different outlook on what specifically she has done. And their interview a pharmacist who works in the
Wow.
healing center that they have that has Hildegard's name. Now he's a pharmacist, right? Who worked with the drug companies and how he came to really just work with what she's suggested and what she advocated. I just want to put one caveat there. I know one of the things that I read about in the book was pennyroyal. And some of the things today you have to be careful about using. So please, if you're going to use her remedies, if it sounds something like you haven't really heard of before, please look it up and make sure that there's no adverse reactions that can occur. Some herbs,
Mhm.
if you took too much of it, can wreck your liver. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
no.
awesome. So I think um, just to summarize, I guess, and look at what we would consider to be our wisdom practice. What we've done is taken some quotes from Hildegard
Mhm.
and suggesting, right, that you might apply some of this to what you're doing every day as a wisdom practice. So this is one of the quotes. Glance at the sun, see the moon and the stars. Gaze at the beauty of Earth's greetings. Now think. What delight God gives to humankind with all of these things. All nature is at the disposal of humankind. We are to work with it, for without it we cannot survive. The earth which sustains humanity must not be injured. It must not be destroyed. Hildegard of Bingen. And the other quote, because she talked so much about singing, right? And obviously, music as a way of being prayerful was really important to her. And she created or brought forth, whichever way you want to look at that, amazing songs and operas and other things. But this is a quote that she also wrote. Don't let yourself forget that God's grace rewards not only those who never slip, but also those who bend and fall. So sing. The song of rejoicing softens hardened hearts. It makes tears of godly sorrow flow from them. Singing summons the Holy Spirit. Happy praises offered in simplicity and love lend the faithful to complete harmony without discord. So don't stop singing. And I just love that. Don't stop singing. Sometimes we forget to sing, or we think we shouldn't sing because maybe we don't have a lovely operatic voice, but don't stop singing. So remember our 4 pillars at Two Crones and a Microphone, right? Our touchstone of Oceana and the way she lived her life, which has so many similarities to Hildegard that it's stunning to think about. Our own collective wisdom and life as crones. Our interesting interview guests, including Hildegard, who came to us through Betty, and your responses, right? Because we're creating community. So, if you read about Hildegard or you know something about Hildegard that you want to share and bring to us, do that so that the next time we do a podcast, we can create even more sharing and even more networking about Hildegard and her own wisdom and how we might be applying it to our own life. Back to you, Betty.
We could go on for hours about her. I mean, it's just, she was just absolutely amazing. And by the way, if you want to access her music easily, just go on Spotify and plug her in, and it'll be right there. It's beautiful, beautiful music. I would like, before we hop off, I would like to remind you that we're starting something new. I think we mentioned it in the last podcast, where if you become one of our patrons, if you go to twocronesandamicrophone.com, you can sign up to be one of the patrons of the podcast. And it's a small fee every month, more, it's not even a cup of coffee, really. And if you do that, we're going to be sending you little things every month, little quotes, little things that you can download, interesting facts, something that I guarantee that you will enjoy. So we hope that you subscribe to the podcast and become one of our patrons. We can also go to minervaed.com for our different classes that we're doing. And this podcast, I believe, comes out at the end of June, and we will have done, Sally and I will be teaching a crystal class in the middle of June, which you will have missed that one, but there are others coming up. So please think about supporting us in that way also, because, the Minerva and the Two Crones are deeply connected. And on that, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, share, let everyone know, and tell everyone about Hildegard, because she is just the most amazing woman. A new book came out, a novel by, I think, Gary McAvoy, called The Seeds of Hildegard. It's a mystery. So that'll be one I'll be reading also, because it's so much fun. I just think 1,000 years later, we're still talking about this woman and the impact that she has on our lives. It's amazing, amazing work. And on that note, I will say to you all, we're helping you to navigate the muddy waters of our time. May you have a good couple of weeks. Sally?
Yeah, and you know, Linda always says, remember to seek your glimmer.
Yes.
And Betty, do you have any further wisdom from Hildegard that she would like to share before we fully sign up? Anything?
I think if she was sitting here now, she would say to just remember to live your best life, to have, to integrate, you know, everything that you have out there. Life is a huge gift, to just enjoy it. Tap into what the energies that are there, tap into what God has given us, and be able to keep yourself in balance, body, mind, spirit.
I love that. And you know, and it fits very much with what we always end with, which comes through Oshana, which is to remember to walk in beauty. And that's essentially what Hildegard was saying. Walk
Yes.
in beauty and in balance. Kirishte, all is made beautiful. So thank you for joining us for this podcast. And we look forward to hearing your comments. Be well. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hi, if you're enjoying Two Crones and a Microphone, please like this video and hit the subscribe button. Enjoy timeless wisdom from modern times, all served up by women in the know.